Hey! And welcome to every Rotten Tomatoes movie score ever. Marvel, ooh, pretty colors, funny jokes, good. But wait, DC, drab colors, joy, kill tonality, bad. Star Wars, fantastic. Yo, Brommandos. When last I talked about Rotten Tomatoes, it was the summer of 2016, and a certain movie about paranormal investigators decided it would blame its fan base for being unfunny. And since then I've thought about returning to the topic to discuss it more fully, except wasn't sure exactly what angle to take. Make a video critiquing Rotten Tomatoes as a website? But why? I mean, it's just a review aggregate, and while I still stand by my opinion that review aggregates are lazy and people would do better to follow individual sources they actually trust, like I said months ago even when I was doing so in partial agreement with this douchebag, don't people just do that anyway? I mean, seek out sources they trust so said sources can validate their opinions? I mean, look, it's not like Rotten Tomatoes' concept is exclusive to the film industry alone. I mean, maybe you can argue that the meter is inaccurate because while an individual critic can heap a film with a ton of praise but still give it a gooey green splat overall, I mean, honestly, who cares? At the end of the day, after all the flowery, pretentious language has been spilt over what it means to make good cinema, doesn't the only thing that matters is whether someone recommends you see the damn thing or not? I mean, personally, I stopped caring what mainstream critics had to say long ago when it became apparent to me that what we want out of life seemed to be completely different. I find the user ranking way more helpful instead. But that's the problem, man. The score! It's still just a score. It all comes down to the score. In the age of the internet, film criticism has been turned into a bloodthirsty spectator sport where all that matters is the final tally. Thumbs up or thumbs down, gladiator style, rip heads off and drink fountains of red, eat shit and die. Except not really. See, critics have been assigning arbitrary scores to movies ever since, well, ever. A practice which I've come to realize is self-defeating because it gives people an excuse to ignore everything you have to say and instead judge either the movie or your review solely based on that final number or letter grade alone. But most critics do it, and people sometimes use those scores as the basis to formulate their own opinions. I don't know why. Actually, when you think about it from that standpoint, wouldn't having more critics be an advantage to a movie, as it means each individual reviewer has less of an impact on the film's overall score? You know, kind of like taking a test. If there was only one problem, well, you better get that problem right. Well, not according to some studio executives who began doubling down on casting blame on Rotten Tomatoes for the poor box office returns from this past summer. That's right, Brommandos. Poor box office returns are due to Rotten Tomatoes. Not superhero cinematic universe fatigue, not overblown budgets, not boring-ass storytelling. Nope. Rotten Tomatoes. Blame the critics. The critics are to blame for pointing out the studio's shitty incompetence. And speaking of studio's shitty incompetence, Disney now owns Fox, so it looks like Hollywood is continuing to shrink. But how do the studios know that it's Rotten Tomatoes' fault? Well, let me tell you. Well, because after crunching some numbers, studios just can't figure out why people don't want to see films like Pirates of the Caribbean 5 or Transformers 15 or The Dummy, and every other uninspired piece of crap that sucks total ass. But what about Blade Runner or Detroit? Yeah, they got good scores, and they still failed. And what about movies like Bad Moms Christmas or Jigsaw? Both got abysmal Rotten Tomatoes scores and are doing just great, largely thanks to their smaller budgets. Even the Emoji Movie. God, just saying those two words together makes my blood clot. Got a horrible score, but still managed to quadruple its budget in the end. So you see, critic ratings don't necessarily mean box office success or failure. It's not that simple. Claiming otherwise is just a desperate theory put forth by the studios, and it's filled with more holes than what remains of the Alamo. Reminding me once again of the old William Goldman quote, "In Hollywood, nobody knows anything." And neither do critics. I mean, look, critics are just assholes who sucked at making movies, so they decided to make fun of them instead. I should know. I am one. We're just people with opinions about the least special thing in the universe, especially online, and especially when it comes to something as accessible and subjective as film. See, I can argue why Transformers 2 is garbage because it's an hour too long and the script reads like it was written by a deflating balloon with Down syndrome, but at the end of the day, my cousin's just gonna go and shake his head and say, "Yeah, but it made $1 billion, dude." However, even though I don't think review aggregates and online criticism is the literal destruction of the movie industry, I do have a beef with Rotten Tomatoes, and I'll tell you why. Because it all comes down to a form of a conflict of interest, if you will. What is a conflict of interest? Well, it's basically the term used by that schlubby McBoringface HR manager every time you're at your job and you want to do something actually fun. But no, really. It's when a person has competing interests or loyalties, which can result in unethical situations. Corporations hate conflicts of interest because, well, they can quickly get them sued, and no one likes HR. So in my opinion, here's a bit of a moral quandary. If you look at most of the critics on Rotten Tomatoes, you'll see that a vast majority of them are attached to corporate media outlets, such as Vox, Vice, Salon, CNN, Fox, BuzzFeed. Hell, even Gawker had a presence before Hulk Hogan leg dropped them into oblivion. Sometimes these media outlets are owned by parent companies, and these parent companies in turn occasionally own the movie studios making the films that the critics who work for the media outlets owned by the same parent company are reviewing. Kind of what the annoying douche at my old job kept telling me is a conflict of interest. The bigger point I'm trying to make, though, is to answer whether or not you trust the tomato meter, you now have to answer another question first. Do I trust the media?
Well, do you, punk?
Because if you think the media's movie reviews are less political than their news coverage, well, just compare the reception a flick like Wonder Woman got with the existing coverage of Eli Roth's upcoming Death Wish. And remember, at the end of the day, there are enough of these identity politics-driven SJW weirdos attached to the tomato meter approved media outlets to make sure they can tip the scales and certify fresh movies like this.
One big pile of shit.
Thanks for watching, Brommandos. So what do you all think of review aggregates? Was there any validity to what I was saying, or was I just blowing smoke up y'all's... Oh, I almost forgot, Merry freaking Christmas. Anyways, I'm THOMPSONATOR. I'll see you again soon for more action.